If I'm thinking of every resident as what my future self might want, I'm going to speak to them with more grace, with kindness, with respect.
Tips from Trestle is brought to you by E-Menu Choice Point of Sale, Wizox AI, and Clark Pro. Welcome to Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality Podcast. This podcast explores the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and the community experience. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. My goal for this podcast: educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living. How? By bringing the resident and customer experience to the front of mind in our industry. We should bring the passionate spirit of food and hospitality to everything that we do and everyone we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. On this episode of Tips from Trestle, I'm talking with Paige Hoffman. Paige is the lead consultant at Cordia Senior Living, where she spearheads innovative strategies to create holistic, sustainable senior living communities. With a 5-pillar approach encompassing employee retention, business operations, and resident wellness, Paige ensures long-term impact and meaningful experiences for resident and staff alike. Her expertise lies in bridging operational efficiency with human-centered design, leveraging her background in leadership coaching and strategic project implementation. Passionate about future-proofing the senior living industry, Paige is a thought leader dedicated to fostering vibrant communities that balance heart and business acumen. Paige, thanks for being back on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. So when we were kind of doing our planning for this, I learned about your background and thought, okay, well, that's unique. Not, usually I hear I was doing healthcare, or I was doing food service, and I kind of stumbled into senior living, but you come from a whole completely different background of where what you're learning and everything. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your background and how it brought you to Cordia and how you have this unique perspective on senior living.
Yeah, absolutely. It was so different from senior living, but it's amazing how everything I did in the past has really set me up for where I'm at. It's funny how that works. So my background is twofold, right? So I really entered the professional world by being an assistant for a serial entrepreneur who was doing tons and tons of startups with lots of tourism. And I learned on the go. I entered my first numbers into a spreadsheet with him by my side, right? And he truly took me hand in hand on just about everything that I learned on the go. And so most of my business savvy came from quick, constantly changing, really fast on the fly movement. And by the time I was done working for him, he had owned and was operating 11 companies. And I had moved from an assistant role to a business management role, right? And it became second nature. While working for him, I also was going to school, and my degree is in sustainability, both in environmental sustainability and in corporate sustainability. So I had been sprinkling in these little bits of what I was learning in school into these little startups, kind of a really good opportunity to just play on the job and change things. But when I started at Cordia, I took a business office role, right? I had by that point really solidified. I know how to do business work. I'm finishing my college degree. I just want something a little bit more stable and secure and ready for the next step, right? To see something a little bit bigger and a little bit more mature. And so that's what led me to the Cordia business before I took the role that I have.
Yeah. And so you talk about sustainability, and that's really what kind of brought me to want to visit with you, is having this idea of sustainability. I think when we think about it in general, I think, well, we got to do green things and how do we save on energy? But you really have a much more holistic framework that you use. And so I'd love for you to kind of elaborate on the 5-pillar approach that you use and how these kind of guide decision making in the senior living communities you work with.
Absolutely. Yeah, so sustainability, if you Google it now, has turned into an environmental friendly, green environmental footprint, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. About half of my college classes were based on environmental roles, right? And in all honesty and transparency, my role started with focusing on those, right? We were getting rid of single-use plastics or styrofoam,
Right.
and we were saving costs on energy. So it certainly had that path. But when I was studying in school, the greatest trend across everything was how do we think bigger so that whatever we're doing right now that's really, really good can last for a long time,
Yeah.
right? So that could be environmental. How can we preserve the trees so that future generations have them? But it's also what are we doing operationally that sets us up in 15, 20, 35 years? And so what that did through 5 years of schooling was taught me how to be really nosy and ask a lot of questions. That's all it did for me. And I started going into the CEO at Cordia's office when I was working in the business role and saying, okay, I know it's not my job, right? I know it's not, this isn't, doesn't have anything to do with me, but tell me why we're doing this. Explain to me why we're doing it like that. Don't you think the long-term ramifications are going to be XYZ, right? And she could have said, get out of my office. This isn't, go back to your job. But she would say, are you making me a suggestion? Bring me a proposal. And so I started to really hone in. So my role merged at the time from a business office role to a pretty strategic and project-based role, and we called it Director of Sustainability. And when we did that, the residents were super confused and a little bit frustrated because they had no idea what I did for a living. And it caused me to take a step back and figure out, okay, what is it that I'm trying to do for Cordia? And we created the 5 pillars and we operated a pillar system within the community. So it was easy to model after. And what we chose were resident wellness, right? So what decisions are we making that make sure that the residents currently and the residents moving in are well in whatever way that looks like for them? It's not just physical, right? Community longevity. And this is a big one, right? It's our CapEx expenditures, right? It's our building maintenance. It's our culture as a community, business operations, right? Because no matter how good it feels to work in senior living, the investors at the end of the day still need to meet what they were told that they would meet in order for us to do a great thing next year again.
Yeah.
Employee retention. Right? Employee retention is, I try to look at it as an investment, not a cost. And if you don't have good employees within the community, you are not sustainable, right? Everything we do relies on those employees. And then last but not least, where we started, environmental footprint, responsible business decisions, just being another person making decisions going, all right, is there a more responsible way we can do this that doesn't hurt all the other pillars? Is there ways we can just be a little bit better to the planet?
Yeah. So when you think about those 5 pillars and you're looking at and thinking about those long-term impacts of decision making, right? How do you
Mhm.
balance kind of the immediate operational needs, right? Like hey, from month to month or quarter to quarter, we've got to hit census numbers or we got to make sure that we hit our food costs. How do you balance those kinds of things with the way those decisions have those longer term impacts on whether it's residents or staff or just the community ecosystem as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely. That is the nature of my role, right? Balancing what we need to do now with what we hope to do later. The easiest answer is start with the low hanging fruit, right? What are the ways in which we can make our community better? We can make our employees' jobs easier. We can make our residents happier. We can tidy up efficiencies and make people feel like they're being heard and they're being taken care of. That then fall right back to our strategy, which means we have to get really crystal clear with what our strategy is. And I've talked a lot in the past about strategic planning, right? And the difference between strategy versus planning. They're not the same thing. And they get confused a lot. But if we know our strategy, right? If we understand we're doing this thing because we believe it's the best choice based on these decisions, right? If we can really fall back on that, then when we are trying to decide, all right, do we Do we listen to all the suggestions this week or do we wait for those 2 years? They can complement each other. I think sometimes when we're managers, especially thick in the operations, we get stuck thinking that it's mutually exclusive, right? We can't take up care of the future because if we do, that means we're sacrificing now, or vice versa. And so part of what makes my role really neat is that I have the luxury to step back and go, okay, I can meet some of your needs today, and we can meet a lot of the business's needs in a year. And along the way, I'm going to tick off all these little needs that you have, and we're going to get to the exact same place. Like, this is a win-win. When the community is winning, we're all winning, right? So it's a lot of it is reframing, and some of it is just prioritizing and communicating over and over and over again. We haven't lost what you're looking to do. We've got you. Here's our timeline. So yeah, I don't know that we really choose one or the other. It's just more of a how do we get it all done within the time we have.
Yeah. I always think about the interdepartmental like relationships when you think longer term, right? Because
Yeah.
if you're going week to week and month to month, you don't necessarily, if I'm the chef, for example, like I'm not really worried what's going on with marketing this week, unless there's some sort of impact directly to me. But over the course of 18 months, 3 years, 5 years longer, like we have
Yeah.
to figure out what that looks like. And so when you think about what you do and how it impacts the resident experience, what are the kind of the first things that come to mind that you think, okay, I have to make sure that we're doing these things so that our residents truly get a positive experience from the initiatives we have?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind when I hear that question is I have to make sure we're treating the residents the way our future selves would want to be treated.
Yeah.
First and foremost, right? And it's not an operational efficiency, and that's not a project to implement. But if I'm thinking of every resident as what my future self might want, I'm going to speak to them with more grace, with kindness, with respect, right? The residents who live in our buildings are experts on life already, right? They are experts at the human experience in ways that I can't imagine yet. And sometimes they move into a community and they lose some of that. And so to me, it if what success looks like, right, is if the residents who live in the building that I work for and the employees who work beside me and the processes are all going toward creating meaningful lives. Just creating meaningful lives, right? It's continuing opportunities for the employees to have meaningful lives, for the residents to have meaningful lives. And so that cross-functional piece that you mentioned, I think that's my favorite place to work, right? That like gray, messy,
Yes.
tension-filled, tumultuous, circuitous journey, that's my favorite because it's really hard to see. It's ambiguous,
Yeah.
right? So I like to poke in places in there and go, hey, we can work together here and you do this and I'll do this. And I promise if you like have some faith and we talk a lot throughout the journey, we're going to get there and everyone's going to be happy. But like, trust me, I know it's scary. So if we do those things, I think we don't have to have the perfect technology. We don't have to have the perfect systems. But if we've got that real priority and we're willing to trust somebody to lead us through all the gunk, then our residents are satisfied.
Yeah. One of the things I think about is I see people get confused about this term silver tsunami, right? Because
Yes. Yeah.
not confused in that they don't know what it means, confused in the impact it's going to have on senior living, right? Because the silver tsunami is starting to happen now, and that's kind of that 72, 73, 74, 75-year-old senior. Look at the ones that are actually in our communities, and they're actually closer to 80 to like 82.
Absolutely.
So we got to be thinking about them, but we're not doing much right now for them. Does that make sense? Right? Because we're still in this kind of 5-year, 7-year window of that's when they're really going to be looking to move in. And so
Mhm.
thinking about that generational shift, right? Going from the, silent generation to boomers, how should communities be trying to evolve services, operations, things like that to stay relevant, but also kind of do what you just said, like keep your current residents in mind as well.
Technology continues to drive changes in senior care, and that includes food service. eMenu Choice is an award-winning point-of-service application for managing the dining function in senior living communities. This mobile, touchscreen-enabled software enhances the dining experience for residents while streamlining processes for staff. The flexibility and functionality of eMenu Choice makes it an effective solution for any type of senior living environment, from independent and assisted living to skilled nursing facilities. It works for production kitchens or restaurant-style service with options for per meal or a la carte pricing, and accommodates a variety of payments, including bill-to-account, meal credits, and credit cards. Created by a senior care provider with more than a century of experience serving older adults, eMenu Choice eliminates communication barriers between staff and residents while enabling person-centered choices and greater resident satisfaction. eMenu Choice, transforming dining for senior living.
Yes, that tricky balance, right? You're balancing two completely different generations. And a simpler way to say that is you're balancing two completely sets of life expectations, right? Like what they were taught during their core memories are so different, and that can be conflicting. But I actually don't think it's as different, right? They're so different, but they're looking for many of the same things. What my perspective is, and my history has been, is that residents, most people, most humans want to feel like they're part of something special,
Yeah.
right? And most of us, by the time we reach the age that we're moving in, have a lot to be proud of. And so if we're going in creating something special that makes them feel proud to live there, that's a really strong community, all of the other fluff that boomers require, which is important, is just that, right? Like we've created a really strong community, and it's multi-generational. And if that is the basis of our culture, then exactly when we choose to get a dining robot, right? It's exciting and it's important, and I've certainly been part of those implementations, but the important part is, did we do the culture? And when I move in, whether I'm part of the earlier generation or the newer generation, do I feel like I'm going to be valued as a human being? So first and foremost, I think that one. I think the next thing for generational shifts, right? How did they remain relevant? I see these communities across the US who are dying to remain relevant, and they're ready to sink their teeth into new technology, and they're ready to implement things, and they've reached out to work with me, all of that. However, in order to really remain relevant, we need to focus on the culture piece first and
Yeah.
make sure that we're doing a true root cause analysis, right? What are our issues? And why are they happening time and time again? Because spending $100,000 on new technology that your staff isn't going to adopt in the first place, like probably not a sustainable solution, right?
Right. Yeah.
And culture changes are slow, right? But if we spend a year, 18 months, really working on changing some of those minute things, working with the leadership team, working on small processes, right? Some of it is just a lot of communities don't have experience implementing things. And so iteration feels like failure, and it's not, right? So if we work on those first, if you're a real community who wants to really succeed down the line, let's slow things down.
Yeah.
And maybe time will come.
Yeah. I love that piece where you talk about like iteration is not failure, because
Oh yeah.
especially I think in like food service, but even resident experience in general, right? Like we want to try new things, or we'll try a new recipe, or we'll try a new activity, and it goes over like a lead balloon, right? And we think, well, we can't do new things. We can't try these because our people don't want that. And
Right.
it's, I think what I hear you saying, which I believe is accurate, is you got to keep trying till you find those things that start hitting the mark, and then you'll start to feel some of that success. And so the other thing that you mentioned there that I think is important was you were talking about like culture change and how do you need to approach that? And so when you think about buy-in, right, especially when you think about new technologies or processes or systems, I know in my entire career, I was always bringing either a new technology or a new system or a new tool in because
Yeah.
of the programs from the ground up. And so like, how have you seen that buy-in, whether it's employees, whether it's residents, What have you done to ensure that so you can avoid either pushback or resistance and make sure that you have a successful change?
Mhm. Um, my experience has been that there is no avoiding pushback or frustration or a lack of wanting to use, right? Like you may get lucky on one small change and everyone's excited, but it's only because those people have seen you do something else that goes well. So part of it is like manage your expectations.
Yeah.
Change is crunchy. Even for those of us who say we love it, change is crunchy. The biggest thing I've learned is that if there isn't any pushback, right? If people are going along with what you're saying the whole time, they're either so uninvested that they're not doing the work and learning, or they're blowing you off to shut you up, right? And there could
Yeah.
be good employees and kind people, but they are overwhelmed and with whatever they're learning, and they have tuned you out. And so it is my intention when bringing new things to really try to get that conversation continuously happening, right? What do you hate? What's bothering you? Let me work for you. I'm your ally. Let me be the liaison, right? And so when I work with communities, I get to be that in between that goes, all right, I'm not your boss. I'm like your cool sister, right? Like I'm not your boss. I'm not your employee. I am running this and we don't have an option. We have to adjust to it. But how can we make this work for you? Right? You are the manager of this department, not me. So let's partner up
Yeah.
and figure that out together and ask a ton of questions, right? Because it might be that management and me have decided that this is a really great solution. And then we get talking to the supervisor and we go, oh my gosh, this is totally disrupting their entire process. No wonder they hate it, right? So getting that buy-in, letting them bring their own ideas to the table. Nobody who brings ideas to the table is likely to go back on their own ideas, right?
Yeah.
No, let them come to them. And we might not be able to bring all of their ideas forward, right? But we can bring some of them and we can customize them. Like as a business, that community has decided that they're a great fit as a manager or director or supervisor. So let's foster them to do their job. Like let them do their job.
Yeah, I love that, right? It's because that buy-in and letting them be that like the change champion, if you will, to really come in and own it is great. And so, one of the things that we haven't hit on yet, but I think you kind of started to talk about a little bit, is employee retention and sustainability, right? Because obviously, when we first talked about that, I again was in that green sustainability mindset. So employee retention didn't make a lot of sense. But when you take a holistic view of it, it makes a lot of sense. And so why do you guys consider it a key pillar for sustainability? And what strategies do you find effective in retaining staff through sustainability?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when you frame it as such, that employee turnover is wasteful, right? In every type of the way, all of a sudden it makes sense. It should be a sustainable, right? And employee turnover is wasteful. It's wasting time. It's wasting resources. It's wasting culture and tension, right? There is a lot of waste that goes, it's wasting money. It's wasting uniforms, right? Like if we really want to get down to it. So it's wasteful and it's important, right? Because the people who live in our communities spend so much time with our employees, right? So our employees really need to be bought in on our culture and what we're doing. And if they're not, we're doing a disservice to the residents who live there, right? To the people who live there. And so I started honestly not from a place of like money or anything else. It was from a culture perspective.
Yeah.
How on earth can we meet our mission if we've got someone new who doesn't understand the true mission every day or every month or every week, right? And things start to fall apart. You can't have good implementations if you've got new staff who don't understand, right? So you need some of that core base. So we started to talk about adding it as a pillar because of that. And then I started trying to prove out the concept, right? Because as I mentioned, my CEO of Cordia, who has allowed me to really shape my role in a lot of different ways, said, is this a proposition? And if it's a proposition, show me the proposal. And so I was proving out, here's the concept for employee retention. Here's why I believe. And all of a sudden I saw the numbers. And we can't pretend that those don't matter, right? So I saw the numbers of how much it truly costs to just get a new employee in and train them for the first 90 days. And I thought, this is madness. Like,
Yeah.
this is crazy. So to that end, when you really do the math, you learn that you can afford to pay employees a lot better than most of us are doing, right? And no one wants to hear it. I realize that it's not the cool thing to say at the conferences.
Yeah.
But I genuinely believe that if you pay your employees well and you take care of them, they come back and take care of your business, right? I was taught that at Cordia, and we've seen it work, right? So simple things, right? If we want to talk about a bullet point of strategies, paying our employees the top dollar for what they're doing allows them to let go of their side job and not be so exhausted, which makes them more likely to come in. It also allows them a little bit more flexibility and less likeliness to be sick, right? Finding ways to be flexible with our scheduling, right? A lot of our housekeeping staff have really flexible schedules that meet the needs of their kids because that's what works for them. And they can clean at a time that works for them, right? It mostly works out. So getting really flexible, treating your employees well, paying them well, it's all basic stuff, but it's treating them as humans, right? We're just caring for them. Of course, we have good benefits, and of course, we maintain our good culture. But I'll tell you, I've had a few big life crises since I started working at Cordia, and because the owner and CEO there told me when I said, I'm going to go to the hospital and I'll come right back. And she said, no, you're not. You're going to go to the hospital and you're going to go home. And then in a couple hours, you're going to text me the things you need me to finish, right? Then I became the manager who started doing that for people. And then employees started doing that for each other. And now it's truly the culture. And so you don't have to come up with gimmicks, right? It's you work there because even when you leave, you want to come back.
Yeah. I love that you started without really looking at the dollars and cents, because usually that's where everybody starts, right? It's like, well, if we'll use your wage example, right? If we pay 50 cents more an hour or a dollar more an hour, what's going to cost us this much? But what I don't think people realize is, what are those lost shifts? What are those empty shifts? What is the cost of that turnover dollar wise? It's things like that where it's all hidden either behind the scenes or a different line item, and you don't math on it. Then really come about. So I hear exactly what you're saying, and I love that you have taken that approach, and Cordia takes that approach. So as we wrap up here, I want you to put on your futurist hat, right? Because you're talking long-term sustainability, right? We're not talking you said 30 years at one point earlier.
Absolutely.
So put on your futurist hat. Let's say the next 5 to 7, maybe 10 years. What are 2 or 3 trends or challenges that all of the people listening, all of the community, senior living in general, things that we should be preparing for to try and be sustainable in those 5 to 7, 10 years?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing that was like a big 2024 topic was like technology and AI, right? To that, I think prioritizing what technology and not getting wrapped up into this like crazy data sprawl is going to really future-proof a community, particularly communities who've got more than one property, right? Things get really messy really quickly.
Yeah.
And so while age tech is becoming new and fancy, and I'm excited to see it, we have to, as communities, prioritize what products to adopt and why. And do those products, are they interoperable? Do they work with our other products, or are we duplicating things and getting messy? And senior living is just young and naive in that part of the world, right? We don't have a lot of experience cleaning up data and making sure that we're making those fact-based decisions. And I'm seeing it, but there's a real chance for a lot of people to get sucked down this like fancy solution data sprawl, where in 10 years, trying to clean up the mess of that on the back end is going to be really tough. And to prove out your ROI, right, on things is going to be really tough. So that would probably be the first. Every community's feeling it, whether they're looking for their first POS system or they're doing the exciting new changes and doing exergating and, all the other stuff. You're still feeling it. So somewhere along the lines, that's an important one. We've talked a lot about it, but if communities would take a step back and really work on their culture, right? Figure out what they're trying to achieve. Are they a community that is trying to just be an old school apartment unit with a bed. And if that's the case, okay, but be really honest and transparent. I think the newer generations, right? Boomer and then Gen X, right? Because they haven't forgotten about Gen X coming after. They're curious and maybe a little skeptical. And the beautiful thing about a curious and skeptical resident is that you're not going to get away with lying a lot, right? And so pretending that you're one thing and being something different just isn't going to fly in 10 or 15 to 30 years. So being really honest, and I think there's a beauty in community saying this is who we are, and this is who our market is, and we're trying to serve them. And this for everybody, but this is who we are, and we're really clear about it. I think that's going to be another one, is just getting really clear with your mission and who you are and what you're looking to do with that. And then after that, I think that environmental sustainability really deserves a nod, right? More and more people, more and more humans care. And if we're an irresponsible business, I'm not going to move into it down the road, right? If we're not making good decisions and taking care of our grandkids' kids, I'm just not interested in it. And so then I start thinking really about like Gen X and millennials, because they're coming, right? We're future proofing. It's the future
Right.
hat. We can't have sustainable buildings for our millennials if we don't build them now.
Yeah.
So how do we start to do those things that maybe we can figure out a way to take care of the cost right now, because not all of our residents are going to care, but in 30, 40, 50 years, they certainly will. And to be the community that says we already built it, we cared for this long, is going to give them a significant reputation.
Yeah. Love it. Those are three really great areas to key in on. And so thank you for sharing those. So how can listeners learn more about all of the sustainability, what you're doing at Cordia, if they want to maybe work with you on a project or something? How can they learn more and connect with you?
Absolutely. If it's a weekday, I'm on LinkedIn, so that's the easiest way to do so. And my last name is currently Hoffman, but in 3 weeks it will be McMaster. So Paige McMaster by the time this comes out. And they can always reach out to me via the Cordia website or my email address. But LinkedIn is really the place that I love to meet new people. And even if it's just an intro call over a cup of virtual coffee and getting to know other people who are excited or who have serious needs is fun for me. So I'd encourage it.
Perfect. Well, Paige, thanks again for all of this, for giving us a broader view of holistic sustainability. And thanks for being a guest on Tips from Trestle.
Oh, thanks for having me. I had a good time.
So there it is, everybody. Another one in the books. Thanks again for tuning in. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestlehospitalityconcepts.com. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.